you're going to love Saver online classes. We add a new tutorial to the library weekly. You have unlimited access. And if you like my style, my explanations, you can learn so much more. In this video, I'm sharing with you a fantastic technique which I like to call feathering. Now, it's for individual molded chocolates. Before you start, you may want to watch our video on tempering chocolate. Some of these techniques aren't necessarily practical, but they look absolutely amazing. And this is one of those. It has quite a few steps to it, but for a special occasion, it would make the perfect chocolate. I'm not going to show you a filling, so this is just purely focusing on creating a unique chocolate shell. For this first step, you will require some tempered dark chocolate. I'm using a sphere mold for this technique, but you can use any mold as long as it doesn't have any patterns in it. So it needs to be completely smooth. You will require some toothpicks as well for this first step. I'm using a disposable piping bag, which I'm going to fill. This is great to do in pairs, so we're going to pipe chocolate into the mold and then we're going to stick 2 toothpicks into each cavity. We're actually going to use this as a stamp. So I'm just going to fill a row before putting the toothpicks in. Place 2 toothpicks in each cavity and just have them standing upright. They don't need to go right through to the base. Once you've completed the whole mold, you can place it in the fridge for about 15 to 20 minutes to enable the dark chocolate to contract. So continue filling the mold until it's completely full. And of course, you have to do this step in the mold that you're going to use for this particular technique. So these have been in the fridge for 20 minutes. We're going to use these to create a stamp. So you need a second mold, or you can take these out of the mold at this stage, polish the mold until it's clean. And the next step, we're going to spray the mold with a layer of just plain cocoa butter. If you don't have a spray gun to spray the cocoa butter, just simply leave that step out and go straight on to the next step. Ensure that the cocoa butter is 31 degrees, fill up the canister on the spray gun and lightly spray the mold. You only need a thin coat of this first layer of cocoa butter. So you can see once the cocoa butter is set, it'll give a cloudy finish on the mold. But as the cocoa butter actually contracts away from the mold, it's going to give us a beautiful shine and finish on the individual chocolates. For this next step, I'm preparing some cocoa butter. I'm going to create a black cocoa butter. This next step you can really do in any color that you want. So we're going to add 20% cocoa butter to 80% chocolate. If you wanted to use a white chocolate and color it, you can do so. In that case, you don't actually need to use colored cocoa butter. I'm going to sieve in the black soluble color. So we add 10% color generally as a rule to cocoa butter. I've melted the cocoa butter just on direct heat. As soon as I mix this through, I'm going to emulsify it with a stick blender. Once the cocoa butter is well blended, I'm going to combine 20% of the cocoa butter with 80% of the chocolate. Now there's not a set weight on this because it's really determined by how many molds that you're actually going to create. I've got 150 grams of cocoa butter here, so this would make about 10 molds. So if you're doing a smaller quantity, you may want to make a smaller amount of the cocoa butter and then combine it with the dark chocolate. Before you combine the cocoa butter with the dark chocolate, you must ensure that the cocoa butter is at 31 degrees and the dark chocolate is at 32 degrees, and then combine them together. You need to maintain a temperature of about 32 degrees constantly, or else you're going to have problems with the stamp sticking. So keep rechecking the temperature and reheat it as required. Now I've weighed out 20 grams of the black cocoa butter and I have 80 grams of dark couverture that's been tempered. I'm now going to combine the two. This will be enough for about 2 chocolate molds. We need the viscosity and the thickness of the chocolate. This technique doesn't work if you use 100% cocoa butter. If you use 100% chocolate, it doesn't work either because it's a little bit too viscous. So this gives us a nice balance in between. Keep in mind, you must keep reheating it as required. Now you have a couple of options here. As I said, we're going to use this as a stamp. Dip it in the cocoa butter and chocolate mixture, place it into the mold, press it in and pull it out. You can, after each stamp, wipe the surface of the chocolate and use it again. If you're not going to do that, you will need to use a new stamp each time. So you can simply clean this and do it again. Another alternative to using chocolate is to actually mold silicone in the mold. The disadvantage with that is the silicone contracts a little bit and you don't always make full contact with the chocolate cavity. And you don't always make full contact with the mold itself when you actually press it in. Okay, so we're going to dip this in, press it in and then pull it straight out. When you're dipping the stamp, don't dip it any more than 3/4 of the way. Aim for half. If you have too much cocoa butter on the actual stamp, it won't leave a pattern in the mold. Now we just wipe off any drips so that we're left with a nice round shape. We're ready now to press into the mold. So press straight down and then pull out. It'll create a little bit of suction. If we have a look here, I've got quite a thick coating of the cocoa butter and it's not very detailed in the pattern. What you can actually do if that happens, it means that you're adding too much cocoa butter to the stamp. You can dip again straight away and pull it out. So here is your option. You can either use the stamp again. If you're going to use it again, you need to actually wipe the surface with a dry, lint-free cloth, or you can go for a new stamp. You can actually polish these back and use them again, so you don't have to make them each time you do this technique. Don't be afraid to go in and out of the mold until you're getting that beautiful feathered pattern. Once the mold's completely finished, allow the cocoa butter to set and scrape the top of the mold. We're then going to prepare a colour to go over the top so that it highlights the feathered pattern. So I've chosen to do a white colour, which I'm simply going to spray pure cocoa butter. I'm going to combine some cocoa butter with 10% white titanium colour. We're going to combine the oil-based colour with the cocoa butter. Now, once again, if you wanted to make this pink, if you wanted to make it yellow or red, they would go perfectly with the black feathered pattern that we've already prepared. Add the colour in, sieve it in. We're going to treat it exactly the same as we did the black cocoa butter. We're then going to emulsify it with a stick blender. It needs to be at 31 degrees Celsius before spraying the mould. Now that all the colour is added, we simply need to emulsify that with a stick blender and ensure that it's at 31 degrees Celsius before spraying the mould. If you haven't got a spray gun or compressor, at this stage you could line the mold with white chocolate, or you could colour the white chocolate with an oil-based colour instead. Because we've got that layer of cocoa butter, you'll still get a fantastic shine and finish on your end chocolate shell. Before you start spraying the white cocoa butter, ensure that the feather pattern has set. When you're spraying in the white, you may need to do 2 layers. Do a thin layer first and let it set, and then apply a second coat of the white cocoa butter. As soon as you finish spraying, turn the mold upside down and scrape off any excess cocoa butter. Now that we've sprayed the mold and scraped the top surface and the cocoa butter has set, we're ready to pipe in a layer of tempered couverture. It's important that the couverture is exactly 32 degrees if you're using dark, 31 for milk and 30 for white. If it's even slightly cold, won't be warm enough to actually melt that cocoa butter layer for it to contract together as one piece. So that's a really essential step. You do need to temper chocolate for this next stage. I'm going to pipe into the mold. You can also use a ladle or a spoon to fill the mold and scrape it clean. Pipe into each cavity. Tap out the air bubbles by tapping it from side to side. Turn the mold upside down and change the position of your hand. And tap it with the handle of the scraper. Scrape it while it's still upside down. If you're using a melting tank, you can tap the chocolate out straight back into the tank. If you're like me, and today I'm using a bowl, I need to wait for this chocolate to set, and then I'm going to place it back into the main vat or tank of chocolate. Once the surface of the mold has been scraped clean, we're going to simply wait for the chocolate to set. Now this is just a technique video, so I'm not going to create a filling with this video. We have so many molded chocolate fillings to choose from in our library. So go to one of those videos, pick out the recipe of your choice, and then pipe it into the cavity of your mold. This is a really new technique, and because of the stamp you're using, it does take a little while to get to know the pressure. No 2 chocolates are going to look exactly the same with this technique because it depends how much pressure you place in each time, but I think the finished chocolates look absolutely beautiful. If you enjoyed that episode, you will love my channel. Subscribe today for even more tutorials on chocolate and baking. Best of all, it's free, so get on it.